Yes. The 112th Congress opened with what historians have described as an unprecedented event in the history of our legislature. A full reading of the Constitution of the United States. Congressmen and women read from the document which remains as important to us today as it did 224 years ago. Democrats and Republicans, young and veteran lawmakers joined their voices with reverence to the immortal words penned by our founders. Their accents reflected the myriad districts that did not even exist when the document first came into being. As Representative John Lewis, an icon of the civil rights movement, read the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, he became visibly moved by the momentousness of the words of our Constitution. Yet 224 years ago, the Founding Fathers could never have imagined, when they traveled to Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention, that their efforts would result in a document that would withstand the test of time. One morning, George Washington wrote in his diary, "I am mortified beyond expression when I view the clouds that have gathered over the brightest morn that ever dawned upon the country." Why was General Washington worried? Well, the unity following the Revolutionary War years had evaporated. The national treasury was empty. Barbary pirates were preying on American shipping, and an armed uprising led by Daniel Shea was occurring in Massachusetts. The government, under the Articles of Confederation, was powerless to act. To remedy the deficiencies in the Articles, the Founding Fathers met in the sweltering heat of Philadelphia in order to form a new government. Since that time, the meeting of the convention has taken on a timeless, mythic dimension in the minds of many. Yet there was little indication that they would succeed. In fact, the New Hampshire delegation arrived 2 months late, and the Rhode Island delegation decided that the proceedings weren't important enough to attend. Even James Madison despaired of the possibility of anything meaningful happening at the convention. He wrote, "The necessity of gaining the concurrence of the convention, the approbation of Congress, the sanction of the states, presents a chance which inspires despair. Yet, against all odds, they would succeed, producing a document that has served as the cornerstone for democracy around the world." But ladies and gentlemen, the question we must ask ourselves today is whether this same zeal for liberty still animates the citizens of our country. After leaving the last session of the convention, Benjamin Franklin was legendarily asked, "Sir, have you given us a monarchy or a republic?" "A republic, if you can keep it." Franklin's warning reminds us of the importance of following current events and wisely electing our leaders. Our great Constitution guarantees equality under the law, yet it took the courage of suffragists demanding an end to disenfranchisement to make these words a reality for women with the 19th Amendment. It took the actions of civil rights protesters marching for freedom to make these words a reality for African Americans. The Constitution has weathered the storms of economic crises, civil war, and terrorism. It is the task of each individual to preserve, protect, and defend this indelible heritage. In the First Amendment, the Founding Fathers gave us all of the tools necessary to keep a watchful eye on our government and our liberties. They envisioned a free press to keep government accountable, freedom of speech to let us voice our thoughts, freedom of assembly to gather peaceably in protest, and freedom to petition our government for a redress of our grievances. Yet the fact that a quarter of Americans can't name a single right guaranteed by the First Amendment reminds me of a warning eloquently delivered by President Reagan. Freedom is a fragile thing and is never more than a generation away from extinction. It is not ours by inheritance. Americans of all ideological stripes have long exercised their First Amendment freedoms. In the past year, we've seen Tea Party protests against government spending sweep across the nation. A few weeks ago, we saw workers in Wisconsin protesting against a bill that would decrease the power of labor unions. These protests have aroused controversy, yes, but above all, they have been peaceful. These images contrast sharply with events in the Middle East, where government officials have cracked down violently on individuals who yearn for the same freedoms that we have. And even though the men and women on the streets of Libya or Egypt may speak a different language or have different religious beliefs, President Obama put it best when he stated, "All people yearn for certain things, the ability to speak your mind and have a say in how you are governed." How fortunate we are to live in a country whose Constitution enshrines these values. In 2008, I learned of the importance of democratic participation when I volunteered for a political campaign. I knocked on many doors in my community, handing out flyers and urging people to vote. I learned more in a day of speaking to people than I ever did in my government class. It was a really eye-opening experience for me. Let me tell you why. I spoke to a mother who was worried about rising health care premiums, a grandfather worried about the state of Social Security, and a veteran who had returned just a few weeks earlier from Iraq and was worried about those he had left behind. There was something truly remarkable about the kindness of people who invited me into their homes. Many of them were concerned about the future of the country, just as George Washington and James Madison had been, when they thought that the young republic would be just an idea in the hearts of the founding fathers. When thoughts of the future turn bleak, we must remember the sweltering summer of 1787. Amid insurrection and economic woes, the founding fathers produced a document, and so set the course of the freest nation the world has ever seen. Benjamin Rush, a member of the Constitutional Convention, reflected later that year, "The war is over. But this is far from being the case with the American Revolution. On the contrary, nothing but the first act of this great drama is now closed." No matter which act of our country's history we find ourselves in today, so long as we adhere to the calling of the first three words of the Constitution, we, the people, we, ordinary men and women, we will work and vote and fight in order to form a more perfect union. And if our rights are ever lost, it will not be because the Constitution has failed America, but because Americans have failed the precious heritage that was given to them by the men who argued and worried and sweltered during the long, hot summer months of 1787. Thank you.